Hello, I'm Chris Solo, and welcome to the Fabled 42, where we build community through friendship, gaming, and chaos. You are watching the Quests and Answers. You catch us live every Monday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific here at twitch.tv/Fabled42. But before we get into tonight's episode, we're going to dive into our announcements. Everything you see that's 3D printed in all of our streams is brought to you by Griffin Co. We are Vorpal powered. Our video and audio displays for our campaign shows are brought to you by Vorpal Board. If you want to support the channel, support the show, please go check out our Patreon. Our moderators in the chat will drop those links. Go ahead and follow those. We have a lot of exciting pieces of content and things that will eventually pop out with Patreon. So currently, Ronan and I are doing some lore stuff. So we are doing some lore of Ukador, some like really in-depth depictions of a lot of the different pieces of lore and all the things that go along with it. That will be available on Patreon. We are in talks about the prom episode for Wizards of Ukador, which I'm going to bring up in our meeting tomorrow to do a 1, 2, or 3-part or one long part watch party with our Patreon subscribers. So we will all watch the episode together, and then it will go and live on Patreon. So if you want to catch any of that, go ahead and check out our Patreon. This is Quests and Answers, where we go on a quest to find those answers. This is our normal weekly show. It's an hour-and-a-half show. However, if you're interested in very specific, finite, detailed, short, bite-sized pieces of content, 20-minute pieces, they all live on YouTube. So if you go on YouTube, you can check out those small Quests and Answers segments. Without further ado, let's get ready. Let's talk. Let's talk about, what are we talking about today, guys? Deities in your world. With some of the bigger egos of the network. Should be interesting. And Dianne. But let's do some panelist introductions, and we'll start with you, Dianne.
With me. My name's Dianne Hall. You can find me at the Pretty DM on Instagram, sometimes on Twitter, mostly retweeting casual and Fabled 42, but whatever, I don't really do Twitter. You can find me here on Mondays for Legends of Shawgal, which will be right after this at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. You can find me here on Wednesdays for Realms of Ukador, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and Fridays for Wizards. Or this Friday, we have Monster of the Week, so that will be at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And also Saturdays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. And every other time that they allow me to be here, I'm here. I just sit in the corner and wait.
All right. And with that, the dice roller himself, Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan Campbell, better known as Casual, and you can find me on Casual_Campbell for Instagram, Twitter, and pretty much any social media you want to find. Not just social media. If you just Casual Campbell, you'll find me on pretty much any website that lets me log into it. I'm also on Vault 42, Legends of Shawgal, Wizards, and much like Dianne said, anything they let me be on, I will be there one way or another. You cannot stop this ego. And also running the Discord. So if you guys ever just want to hop to our Discord and stay in contact for future things that are coming, that would be the best thing to go to. And I can also make your experience a lot better there.
And last but not least, Jesus. Me. I am Chris Solo. I'm just kidding. Ronin.
It's only fair. It's only fair.
Shots.
Who is this guy?
I am Ronin Fawks. You can find me at Ronin Fawks on Instagram. I am the host of the flagship show here on the Fabled 42 network called Fox Talks. It's every Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific. That's the only show I can remember the time of. And I'm also on Wizards.
We need to get you a little sheet that has everything.
It won't help. I won't remember to write it down. And that is every other Friday, right? Wizards now is every other Friday. Yep. And so you can find me there playing a pretty big asshole. And yeah, I do a lot of these shows. So a lot of the lore stuff. So that's where you find me. And I'm also on Discord.
Everywhere that you're needed.
Everywhere.
But yes, thank you all so much for being here. Some of my favorite people to talk about crazy things that we'll talk about more than 20 minutes because that 20-minute conversation was too short. But to kind of continue with the announcements and things. You guys know who I am. I don't need to do that. But tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific at Discount Bard, I, Miss Diane, and Mr. Jordan are going to be playing Dead by Daylight alongside with Discount Bard and Utahime, who is in the chat.
I'm really excited.
I am excited to murder people. And Eddie has an awesome new setup that me and him were talking about for a while about doing facial cams. So instead of just seeing the main streamer, you're going to see all 5 players on the screen. Cool. I don't know how he's setting it up yet. We're going to do some cool things. So you're going to see all 5 of us. Crazy. I get into the character. These two have played with me, and I'm pretty good at the murdering.
I'm pretty good at being murdered.
It's fair.
And I'm pretty good at just not dying first. Hollywood, your move.
But the very last announcement, why I brought a lot of you here when I was teasing with the picture. I'm not going to do it because Zoom's being weird, and I have this new digital background, kind of, because the real one's not here yet. Exciting news. The Fable 42 home studio is moving hopefully by Monday of next week. So I'm starting to move out of the tiny little room I have into a very large office, which is going to open up lots of things. I'll be able to do more like painting and crafting segments because I'm not like living on top of myself with all the stuff in here. I've talked to some people about doing different layout sets and things. So like, massive trays of different terrain sets and things. So it's an upgrade for the studio. But it is more of a reason for all of the support and everything you guys are doing because you're being able to make that happen. The other cool thing is the space is big enough for a table. Just saying, if anyone's in Oregon, we can play a game.
I'm just saying, if somebody wants to pay for my expense in a hotel, I can hop in my car.
Let's go.
Damn, I just bought an air mattress. I'm just saying it.
I
we'll
think
go camping.
2 days. I think I could be there in like 2.5 days.
Okay.
Maybe 3 days.
So that's why the minis are gone, and we're using Zoom so that we can use fun backgrounds and all that. But this week is like packing and moving and building day. I'm gonna be signing the lease tomorrow and building out the new tables and the new things tomorrow during the day, before our murder sessions. But yeah, that's the exciting stuff. I think the smoke alarms there are better than the ones in the house, and there isn't a window that opens, so I probably won't be doing more of that, which is fine.
We'll figure it out.
But with that all being said, we are here for the next episode of Quests and Answers. So let's talk about deities. We all like deities. We all like to build deities. I know a lot of people use just the normal Forgotten Realms ones, and some people like to use just something just to give a god a name and then move on. But a lot of us, I know that we like to go a little deeper. So what? And each of you guys can take turns. But what's your starting process? What just happened? What's your starting process in regards to that? So when you decide, okay, I'm going to make some deities, how do you go about that?
Well, the first thing I decide is if the culture that I'm making the deity for is going to be monotheistic or polytheistic. So is it just going to be a centralized figure that they're all going to worship, or is it going to be a pantheon, or just sort of the structure of how the gods are arranged? And then when I get that nailed out, you start at the top and sort of work your way down. So who's head honcho and that sort of thing. And then I personally like to make a little creation mythos with it, like what they believe as to how the gods came to be. It doesn't have to be super extensive, but it just gives you some framework to work off of. And then you just start fleshing out from there, one by one, sort of like what we did, actually.
Yeah, I like that. Jordan.
I think when I start my deity building, I first decide whether or not the culture has ties to actual creation or just their cultural's creation. A big idea is like a lot of people may worship X god, and I study theology a lot as a Shinto pagan, and like Greek mythology is a core component of how I believe a lot of it works. Yeah. Some people worship just Ares, and they say that Ares and then the mythos created from them. And depending on which way, if they're like, Zeus is my god, then we highlight that tree. If they're like, I don't like Zeus, I will ignore Zeus, and I will go on a branch. And then I decide from the culture which way that lines up. But the culture is my key component more than the gods itself.
That makes sense. What about you, Diane?
So with my world, Shawgal, which you all know and love from Monday nights.
What's that?
It's just this little show. No one likes it. It's got this one guy that's like super into himself. I don't know.
Give him a hand.
Talk to him about it a lot.
Just one hand.
So when I did my deities are pretty heavily involved in the campaign, which is awesome because I do really love the idea of deities. How I go about creating them is I've taken the regular pantheon for D&D, the Forgotten Realms pantheon, as well as the Greyhawk and Eberron pantheon as well. I've just like kind of taken the ones I thought was cool, and then I've altered all of them, so they're not just like the Raven Queen's not like the Raven Queen in Forgotten Realms, and the Traveler is not like the Traveler in wherever he came from, Greyhawk, right? Or I don't remember, but yeah. So I haven't done any naming yet, and I always have pantheons. I'm never a one deity gal, but because it doesn't make sense to me. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, that leads me to the next topic, but I'll give my 2 cents on the deity thing, and then we'll kind of cycle back to that. But so I when I created Ukador, I didn't want to do anything from Forgotten Realms initially because I wanted to just be my own thing. Because I still am. I know how to manipulate it now to where it works best of both worlds. But I was scared about using pantheons or deities rather from Forgotten Realms and then doing it wrong, right? Bringing Raven Queen into Ukador and then totally fucking her up. I can do that by calling her Travanis and making her way different and way better than what I feel the Raven Queen is. So you can take from both. And the reason why I did that initially, well, the second part of that is because I think Forgotten Realms and Ukador are all in the same existence, right? We've teased it. So if you have someone who lives, on Forgotten Realms and prays to their Zeus, which is Ter, I think, right? Ter.
Tiered is their version.
Yeah, so that's their Zeus. That same person would come here, like if he was going to have a conversation with what he feels Zeus would be, it'd be Azir, right?
So it's just a language barrier.
It's a language barrier, and like you're in a different part of the world, like
cultural.
Yeah,
barrier.
it's a religious perception about it. Yeah,
right.
So you have Zeus when you're in Greece, but then when you're in the Norse area, way up north, it's Odin. It's the same person, right? If they existed. That's a different conversation. We'll talk about that later. But if you believe that there's this entity that is controlling all the things, it's the same entity, just in different perspectives, right? So that was kind of how I started doing it. So when I built Ukador and the Sarosian civilization, which is the continent of Saros and that main civilization of man, elf, dwarf, whatever, these were the gods that they believed in. And then I started kind of going down that route of naming gods different things in the other parts of the world, which I kind of got away from, because then it gets really confusing and everything else. But I used the Greek god list. I literally went down the list and I resexed the names depending on what I felt like my god of war is a woman, right? So I felt like the goddess of war was more powerful in my story. But most of those gods, it was just super surface level. Unless Travanis, she's part of the story, then I would dive a little deeper. And that's actually what Ronin and I started doing, was taking what I have surface level, giving it some depth, tweaking a few things, and then like what we've come up with so far, it's ridiculous, actually. It's one of those moments where either he says something or I say something and we're like, oh shit. Like, it's that juicy stuff. And you guys will be able to see that if you're on our Patreon, which I should be posting that out maybe later this week, but I am moving, so we'll see.
Maybe we'll have a convo about that.
Yes, maybe we'll have a convo about that.
I'll say the fun thing about your world and specifically is typically when you're building gods, it's like the first phase of world building, but we're going backwards in time, so now we're able to connect things that have already happened, which is a lot of fun.
It's
cool.
a lot of fun.
That's cool.
But I forgot what was the thing that I said that I was going to come back to? What was the last thing you said, Diane?
Ooh, words. multiple gods. Same
I said some
thing.
things.
You
Yep.
said some things.
I said some things.
Anyway, well, it was going to be a good
Roll the
direction.
tapes back.
Yes, we'll wait.
This is a very Ronin-esque segue.
I don't know. That's how I started. I
Feel very comfortable right now.
Yeah, I can't.
I don't know.
So,
I don't remember.
yeah, anyway, so when we're thinking about deities in the world, right? So we're thinking about, we've talked a little bit about like how we kind of, or come up with a list of names of gods and all that. Now, how do you go about creating the actual lore for your deities? So when you're like, how did your deities come about? Like, you know, what's the thought process on that? If some new DM was like, hey, I want to build a world, how do I do this? And you're like, well, don't. No, you should do this, right? So like you need to think about, because it does make sense, especially going back with when I would talk with Ronin all the time, going back and thinking like, okay, I have all this stuff, but we don't know how the gods were created. And I had loose ideas and nothing was ever canon. And even if it was, it's been slightly tweaked. But like, how were the gods actually created? Because that actually makes a big difference in the world now that you think about it after the fact.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know how mine are.
And mine is very created. So like, I guess I'll take this one. When
Go for
I
it.
make my gods are never the creators of everything. They are actually a product of a greater creation. So I always, because my
That's so
belief is
amazing.
everything spawned from nothing. Like nothing is an actual being though. So in my homebrew world, nothing was the original being that decided to divide itself. Divide nothing, you get this infinite outcome. I called it division by zero, actual scientific thing. And from there created little pieces of existence. And those existence became what we call gods, and they just consider themselves people with more power. And then from there, they procreate normally from there. But the idea is there were like Titans in Greek. Those were my Titans. They existed before existence itself and then spawned their children, who then spawned their children, who spawned elementals, who spawned mythical beings, who then created elves, who then created whatever it is they did. And I use like the lotus of life, which is that circle belief where you draw a circle and you draw a circle that connects that circle. And everything comes from that first circle, and it's all altered perspective. And that's how mine is built, building this massive circle of circles that creates a greater visual if you see it from like a top-down view.
Yeah. Diane?
So, yeah, go ahead.
Kind of similar to what Jordan said. My deities were spawned by the elementals, the Ilamatans, which are the four elements, and they are beings. They're ancient beings that were floating around space. I don't know, like specifically, but
We'll get there when we get
floating
there.
around space, and then all of a sudden a world appear. I don't know, but they spawned the deities. So every like deity that's on like the absolute pantheon and so on has been spawned by the Ilamatans. So and they have names, but they're very crazy, and I'd have to look at them to read them because even the creator can't always remember how to pronounce a name.
It's tough.
Especially because I use a lot of like ancient, like Scottish Gaelic and like more ancient languages because they sound cooler, and I can like be like, I don't know how to say that, but this is how I say it.
Yeah. No,
and it works because that's my world.
I use Latin and like archaic Japanese for mine a lot. And God forbid I try to blend those two. And I'm like, yeah, no. They're like, how do you pronounce that? This? I'm like, that sounds better than how I thought. Yes.
I can't wait to hear that recap on Fox Talks.
It's terrible. It's going to be terrible. So I actually do have, in my world, I do have a almighty or alpha or whatever you want to call it, a creator of all things. But in the same vein that you guys just described, so my creator was, without going into like long detail. Oh, yep, you're green again. Without going into like serious detail, basically he spawned the gods that ended up creating the other, created everything else. So even in that regard, they aren't solely the most all-powerful being. This sort of aloof, oblivious being is. Yep, you're back. But that all depends on that. Again, that all depends on the culture. So the dwarves in my world don't believe in that. They believe in more of what sort of Diane was describing, this sort of elemental, chaotic forces coming together to create whatever. So again, it sort of goes back to culture, but that does exist in my world for the humans or
You
humans.
guys might get to meet the Isla Moddins if you continue watching Shoggle.
which I'm excited for. I will say, if I can add to that, I will say one of my favorite. I make a lot of homebrew worlds for a lot of different campaigns or different writings because I do a lot of collaborative writing projects. One of my favorite involving that is one of the creation mythos is that gods were just these beings that exist in space, and when a god dies, they become a planet.
Oh,
and
that's
then
cool.
And the way they did it is so like
Interesting.
our universe, Earth, Venus, Mercury, were all people, and each time they died, they became a planet. And if you're a greater god, then your children will become your moons. Hence why Jupiter has so many moons, because they had so many children. And the sun was like their grandparent, grandfather, grandmother, and then different galaxies are different
But
families.
was Jupiter a better god, or were they just full of hot air?
They were just and that's not
Oh,
even a joke.
jeez.
That we actually made the comment that Jupiter, as great as it seemed, was not that stable to actually have life, which is why there's no life on it. Earth was actually one of the strongest gods because they were able to birth more life. But
That brings up a point too, where if you're giving advice to somebody who's creating this sort of stuff, I don't want to like offend people, but those creation stories can be quite fantastical.
Yes.
Born of dirt, the Jupiter thing becoming a person, all that sort of stuff is very historically subjective. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, no,
So,
you're-
yeah.
But I will say
go
one of
ahead.
the greatest things to consider when, and I guess if it's to like, if someone's building their own world, consider what is true and what is skewed based on perspective. Like, you don't have to actually know exactly how your world was created. You just need to know how this culture believes it was
Right.
created.
Yes.
Right.
Like,
what
if
you're
they
doing is
say-
create a belief.
If I say yes, the planets were gods and they returned to planets when they were killed, sure, you don't have to be right.
Yeah.
But your culture says, if you think I'm wrong, I'll kill your culture, and boom, it's believed to be the truth. But
Right.
you don't, and there could be some truth to it, even if you
Yeah,
want.
all the stars in the skies are all the dead kings looking down at you. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? No, they're all dead suns. Like, what are you?
But-
like, that doesn't.
yeah.
You don't
Right.
mean like.
But you're in
make
my
up what you
city,
want.
like
Yeah,
you can't tell me I'm wrong. I'm the king of this city, and we believe yes, those are the dead kings before me. And
I mean,
Right.
you could say that you're wrong, but then you die.
exactly. So like when making your gods or you don't have to be truthful.
I have a
you just
giant bird deity, and they believe that basically every time it molts, like that the feathers are the people. So
Yeah.
that's
And
the people of the
you
earth.
can't tell them they're wrong. It's their culture, like,
Right.
and that's the beauty of it. You don't have to make the real truth. Just got to make their truth.
Right.
What is the real truth? No, we don't have time for that. Stop.
Yeah.
But so GW did help reminding me what the last thing that Diane had said, which is
Thanks, GW.
the one God doesn't make sense. Which leads into what my question was, but then also Austin also asked a similar question: is have you all made dual pantheons, like good versus evil sort of thing? But I want to stack that a little bit more, which is you can have like a full pantheon, but then also have a savior god, right? I think that's the term that a lot of people use, where it's just like one god you believe in, which is in modern day Ukador, the savior god is Marduk, which we all know and love. And he is the savior god for the
favorite.
Hesian Empire, which everyone's curiously figuring out how the hell that happened. But there's also still all the other gods. So like this is someone else who's kind of wanting to be like Vecna is kind of like that, right? Vecna wants to be, don't believe anybody else, just believe in me, as opposed to
Yeah.
like being part of a team, right?
Sprain in
Yes. Rex.
All connects.
We're not going to talk about Rex right now. We're just gonna. Rex is in the second half of this conversation.
your ear. Oh.
But yeah, so do you ever tap into are you married to just the one? Do you like to have the full thing? Like different cultures in different parts of the world having different perspectives, I guess.
Yeah, and you can fall into some religious tropes that work. You can have the fallen angel trope, that sort of idea of a god turned evil. It's kind of difficult. I mean, it all depends on your writing and how you want to do it. I would say it's kind of difficult to bore an evil god just because of the nature of them. But I mean, I guess you could. Anything's possible. So Everything that I've done has usually been sort of Greek in nature, whereas like there's this interpersonal relationships between the gods and one or more turn for whatever reason for power and control typically, but that's typically the way it works for mine.
I think the way I build a family and then I make them gods after the fact. Like for my specifically the homebrew that I ran during Dark Week, a quick idea is there was originally there's a bunch of gods, but this one for our planet that we know of, there was one woman with two sires, and they both wanted a kid. She was like, "Bet I gave birth to twins. Here you go. Leave me alone." And they were at war, saying, "We own this land." And so there's no good or evil. It's just this side wanted this side wanted that, and then they had more children to bolster their army, and then their children created more, and it became this war of two sides. And then finally, the woman who birthed twins was like, "All right, I'm gonna give you one more child, and you need to stop fighting." And they gave one more child, and they were like, this became the savior, where they're like, this is the most human of all the gods that were born, and all the gods left, and this god was the only one left. Like, all right, well, I'm here to make sure you guys stop killing each other, which didn't work after they left, but you know,
Sure.
like I build a family and build their family drama, and then all right, I was like, all right, cool, and
And
now
even that taps into like, you know, things that people recognize. I guess that's the key that's the key. So like you were talking about the prophesized one. So no matter how crazy you can get as crazy as you want, as long as you keep some elements of familiarity with people that live on Earth, you can do what you want, really.
Yeah, because there's like the creation story, there's the redemption, there's like the revelations or the great second coming, there's the end of the world, and you keep those tropes in there, you could do whatever you want as long as you keep those landmarks. Most people are like,
The flood.
yeah,
This, hint, hint.
Yeah. So we have some really good questions in chat because I totally wasn't paying attention. I'm circling back now. But Utahime said, "Have we used any Native American lore in your stories?" Followed up by Austin's comment, piggybacking off of that. How do you decide what cultures you source from? When I was talking about earlier, I had two separate kind of pantheons sort of going on. I had spiritual gods, and then I had the Sorosian gods. GW, who's in chat, he really wanted the spiritual gods, and the spiritual gods were built off of Native American culture. The problem is because I stream, and everyone's consuming this. The biggest feedback that I got from myself, from other players, from other people, having two different pantheons in a world that people are not familiar with yet, including myself, was too much to manage. It is not dead; it's just tabled for right now, because all those spiritual gods are a more Motul thing, which is a completely different continent, which might be, Realms Season 3 kind of thing, where it's a completely different continent. It's where Torque was from, where Denahi was from. They're a lot more tribal, a lot more spiritual, and thousands of miles away from the other world. But I like the idea of having multiple perspectives on things. But how do you all decide what cultures to pull from? I know that Greek mythology tends to be the big one or the Greek pantheon rather, is because it's just so ingrained in our history of what we've learned as kids and all that. Yeah.
I can take this one as a start if no one else does.
Sure, go ahead.
So as I said, I'm a Shinto pagan, and the beauty of Shinto is the fact that no one really dies. Their spirits always linger enough to guide you. And because of that, I study a lot of like Buddhists, Native American, classic Chinese, especially because I like the idea of how a lot of people who are gods were just people who ascended to their divinity. So like I love the idea of Shiva. I love what Ifrit stands for, Quetzalcoatl from Native American cultures. And I love that they're all spirit guides of a specific element or a specific nature. So I usually pick a personality type, an element or something, pull from a specific culture and make that god be the focus of a culture. So if I've already used one, I will typically not try to touch it. Like when I name my gods, I use Latin, and then I'm like, all right, I use Latin. I go over to Greek gods, and I move over to Syrian nature. Maybe I'll go to Norse because I like Odin. I like specifically Odin and like Freya. I hate Thor. That's just how I feel about it. No offense, but Thor is played out in too many things as a god of
and not
thunder,
Thor
and
part of Fable 42. Thor the
I love you,
god.
Thor, but no, yes. Like I don't like Zeus. I don't like Thor. I'm like, let me use a different one. That's why I like Quetzalcoatl, which is a I believe Aztec or Mayan god of wind and storms, more than I will ever use the cliche Thor and Zeus. And that's how I do it. I avoid cliches. Is how I aim to strive.
Yeah, So back to what I was saying before is I don't have a pantheon in my world. So what that allows me to do is take the race that I'm developing and obviously their culture from that and pick from a specific religion's or culture's religion from that. So like my elves are very heavily influenced by Japanese culture and Japanese religions, and I have a swamp people that are sort of they're basically elves that were one point quarantined because they were thought were diseased. They ended up surviving living in the swamp. They became
So it's Florida.
Yep.
yes. Yes, and they're just as nuts. No, I'm kidding. but they have their because they were forced to live off the land, they have this more spiritual and I took a lot of influence from Native American cultures for that. So because I don't have a giant 20 some odd gods, each culture has their own, so it allows me to take from a bunch of different ones.
Was that a shot?
No,
and my 26 gods.
I mean, no, yeah,
Yeah,
you do have,
no,
you
we're
have
taking
a
shots
lot
at
of
you
gods.
solo.
You have a ton of gods, but that's just personal preference,
I know,
and it's
teasing.
a different way
It's terrible.
a different way to
Too many.
organize them.
Yeah.
Essentially, is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Diane.
So my world's heavily influenced on Iceland specifically. The deities are, again, they're still piecemealed from published D&D books, but once I start getting into actually fleshing out each god, I lean towards Norse mythology. Jordan says he's Shinto pagan. I was raised pagan, so and I've always just thought the Norse mythology pantheon was always like kind of what I gravitated towards my whole life. Thor's actually pretty cool when you read about like actual pantheon. I mean, like, he's definitely played out because of the superhero and everyone's like Thor and like hammers and whatever.
It's like Adventures in Babysitting. We get it.
I'm saying we ignore a lot of Thor's brothers, and that bothers me. Like Thor's.
That's what I'm saying. Is like once you start getting into it, like Thor is still cool, but there's way more. But it's crazy. I'm not even going to get into
advice,
it all. But...
I would say look around because there's a lot of cool ones. Norse, Celtic, a lot of different types of paganism.
I
mean,
lots and lots of cool stuff.
There's so many, but think about what your culture is like. Find a real world culture that mimics that, mirrors it, reminds you of it, and then see what they believe. Like,
and then twist it and shape it.
And then put your mark on it.
That is a solid approach because like Shalgol is very cold and up north, so it makes sense to follow a lot of the more cold cultures, which is predominantly considered Norse. Like if you're in a desert community in your world, you'd probably go more towards Aztec or Persian, Egyptian, Arabian.
I actually have another continent in my world that I haven't fleshed out fully yet, but is definitely more mirroring the Americans. So I'll have more like Native American. There will be because I'm kind of in that like steampunky world. There's definitely gonna be some. I mean, one of my favorite video games is Red Dead Redemption. Anyways,
I still haven't played.
I'm getting on a tangent. God damn it!
Solo, you just do a lot.
I didn't have a computer to play it, guys. I tried once. Remember, I tried to stream it and just died.
Before I shut up for a second, Red Dead Redemption 2, it is the best video game I've ever played.
It's pretty amazing. I played it until that first house that you cleared. That was it. That's as far as I got.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, the end made me the end destroyed me.
Okay.
For days. I wept on my couch for days.
So yeah, I mean, kind of piggybacking again on what everyone's been saying is when you create cultures in your world, right? Because you don't create sometimes you don't create the deities first, you create the cultures first. And then you like, what does this culture remind you of, right? So like the Hessian Empire is based off of the Roman Empire. And while they, depending on what time period, you're at, but the Roman Empire was very much Catholic Church, so they had a savior-esque god. And there's a lot of things that were not done great, and because it's also loosely based on Not that any three of these things are connected. I do like to say that. The Hessian Empire is the Roman Empire, the Holy Crusades, and the Nazis are all put together in one thing. Only because of the belief system, because of magic and then exotic races and trying to have pure bloods, right? But I thought about the people first. I'm like, okay, cool. Who am I basing this off of? And I came up with those three things. I'm like, okay, so they have this leader. They believe that they're the best in the world. Everyone else sucks and they should die. Cool. And then you put in the Holy Crusades, which is like our God is better than your God, sort of thing. But then you also throw in like witch hunts and stuff in there. So if you're using magic, oh, that's not good. You can't do that. Only our people can do the magic. So you start thinking about things like that. And then you have Saros, which was very, very, very strongly based off of Greek, like just a whole civilization of Greek with all the architecture and the art and just the widespread of just all these cultures, this giant melting pot of just creativity. And that's why I was like, okay, Greek pantheon makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing what Dianne is saying. My Motul continent is more Native American because it's based off of that culture. So you find the point is, when you're building worlds, you don't make it up on your own, guys, because you don't have to. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you find something that's real and you kind of flavor it, reskin it, repurpose it, rename it, then it's real. Because then when I'm talking about Izir, the god of everything, the symbol is an eagle, you're like, ooh, everyone's thinking Zeus. Everyone's thinking Odin. Okay, yeah, I feel this feels real to me. And then all of a sudden your world feels more real when you're using real things. Yeah. There's another question. Hang on.
Personally, I was thinking of All Might, but go ahead.
Yeah, a little bit.
All about what?
I will add to that. For me, a lot of my influence, a lot of it comes from anime, because the anime world, or even JRPGs, has a lot of like deep lore and blends a lot of cultures together. Yeah. Final Fantasy is a great example because they all have summons and they all use summon. There's Odin, there is Revenant builds, there's Alexander the Great. They even take the idea of mortals turn deities. So like, take things that make sense and blend them and have fun with it, and just make sure you do it right.
I mean,
mortal turning deity. Where have I heard that?
Right?
That's wild. That sounds like a wild concept.
You know what, Dianne? It's funny that you mentioned that with the two people right below us right now.
Yeah.
Mortals turning deities. I think
they're below us right now.
Yeah, they're both below us.
Okay, I don't know. It's all different.
Got it.
For me.
Yeah. So Utame brought up a really good
that.
question. I'm trying to find it now. So, do you guys work with your players if they would like to have their own character serve a god or god that's outside of your pantheon? Do you allow that or do you not allow that? First off, always say yes to your players.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Yes.
Always.
But don't ever forget the and. Don't ever forget the and.
Yes.
And. Not yes, but yes, and.
You know, absolutely. If a player was like, I really want to worship the god of sawdust, and you're like, ooh, sawdust, why sawdust? And they come up with some compelling reason. I have no idea why I said sawdust, by the way, but they come up with some really compelling reason for sawdust, and they give all this stuff, and they're very excited about it. You have to say yes. Like to Jordan say to and is like, okay, you can try to weave it.
Well, I'm like, okay, so sawdust, so you're probably working with wood. So maybe it's a nature-based god, maybe it's a creativity god or goddess, depending on what they want. That's a great way for your players to feel like they are a part of the world too, because they've helped create something.
I definitely agree.
You might not be like, okay, like I'm not going to think of, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to have a deity of sawdust because that's so cool. But they're not, maybe they're, no, it's a great example though. Because
actually it is.
Maybe it's not a deity of sawdust, but it's a deity of, and then the things that I just listed, or other things, and then that,
So you take their idea
umbrellas
of sawdust,
over,
you find something that is in your world now, and you kind of weave them together.
So
or I make something new that works for that.
The thing to remember is, and I'm been on record, I don't DM, but as a player too, and then as a world builder, the thing to remember about your world is it's never done. Like
it's living.
It cannot be done.
It's a living world, yeah.
So if somebody brings you an idea, and I've done this as a player before, it just makes everything a lot easier if you just run with it and do what Dianne said, or make up something brand new, or just weave it into what you got. It creates two things. It makes the player happy, and it'll make your world better in the end, I promise.
You know, maybe Shalagal, Legends of Shalagal Season 2, maybe someone will be a cleric to
Bow down to
Rexilius.
Rexter.
Oh yeah.
Well, that sounds like a good job for Castilius.
Oh,
There you go.
Solo found us in.
We'll bring Solo in on Season 2.
So I will say, especially like using some, like I like the Sawdust example because I live by anime tropes, and anime tropes are known to be like the weakest thing is not as weak as you believe it to be, and I don't believe there's any idea that inherently shouldn't be included because our knowledge as humans is only 1% of 1%. So there's always more potential. And if someone told me they wanted a god of sawdust, I immediately want to make it as OP as possible and then allow them to flavor at the lowest point of that. You tell me a god of sawdust, I think dead wood. Dead wood means decaying, decrepit. So to me, it's the idea of necromancy, but for nature. And I can go with that. I picture a lot of...
so interesting how we were kind of all on the same
we were on the same
trail, but you took it a little darker, which is weird because I tend to take everything to a dark place.
I also really want to be a nature necromancer now, please.
Yes, and that because anime has taught me one thing, that everything you think of, as small as it is so broken. Like, and I only say this because someone once told me they wanted the power of not water, but specifically H2O. And I didn't think anything of it. But then they were like, now that I got strong enough, I want to split my element. I was like, wait a minute, what? They didn't want to split water. They wanted to split the hydrogen oxygen. I was like, all right, I see what you're doing here. Anime tropes do that. But I feel like I always love, be as cosmetically wild as you want, and I will mechanically make it justified.
Yeah,
sure.
For sure.
Taryn was asking if Jinx could be the goddess of drinking and squats.
Drinking and squats.
So Ferrex brought up a really good
yes,
question.
let's talk about it.
Let's talk about that. How much of the god building that we all do is based off going off brand from the classic tropes? And I asked for clarification before I jumped in. Light is inherently good, dark is evil, storm god reigns dominant, all gods are powerful, that sort of stuff. It's a really awesome, deep question. I have lots of things to say about this, but I want to hear what you guys have to say.
So, Diane, you look like you're ready to go.
Just as an example, like I said earlier, my Raven Queen is different from what you would find in the Forgotten Realms. Like, you know, in the Forgotten Realms, she's the goddess of when you pass, like you have to go through her and like memories and stuff, and it's always very dark and evil, like is like kind of evil, like neutral evil, I guess, if you want to put a whatever on it. But for me, the Raven Queen, yes, still does that and is still probably pretty creepy, just because I feel like everything should be creepy. But she is not evil. She's just true neutral. So she's not going to, I don't know, but I like to go against the tropes sometimes, but sometimes the tropes are good.
Yeah, I have
my brain stopped working. I'm sorry, guys.
I have two primary gods that sort of connect to each other, and maybe we can talk about how they connect later on, but or how gods in general should connect. But the elven god is basically represented by the moon, and then the human god is represented by the sun. And it's actually the human god that's represented by the sun, the light and all that sort of thing, that tends to be more evil. Because in my eyes, it never made, like, a lot of things are like, oh, it's dark, it's got to be evil. But night represents calm, it represents dreams, it represents serenity,
peace,
light, peace. So, and then light for me was always fire, angry, hot.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that I just completely flipped on its head. So that doesn't work at all for me.
That's funny you brought that. I have a vampire lore bit that I don't know if it'll ever happen in Ugador, but it's reversed, where like these creatures are only out during the day and they're sleeping during the night for the same reasons. Yeah,
it just makes it, to me, it always made sense like that. And then you can do things. So if you have a pantheon, doing what, like Chris said, gender swapping some, gender neutraling others, you can add different flavor and stuff like that. And what that does is, when you decide that, just make that random decision, oh, this is a girl, what does that mean? And then you can go down that rabbit hole and see where that takes you, because it's going to take you somewhere and it's going to be interesting. So
I have a weird thought. It has nothing to do with this question though, so continue, Jordan.
So I
really
don't
like hamburgers.
When I do anything that has
it's a deity, but
My divinity does not believe in good or evil. Now, people may see good or evil, but my deities have no concept of good or
Sure.
evil.
They
how we
shouldn't
see it.
technically. Right?
Yeah,
No,
right.
I love that, and I agree
Yeah.
100%.
So, and the reason I say is this, because one of the examples is a lot of people don't like the God of life in my world because this God helps create people. But because of that, that God is also the one who created suffering. We suffer because we exist, because we were made. Death is beautiful because when we die, we no longer suffer. So a lot of people worship the God of death more than the God of life because we will suffer, but one day we will reach bliss. Same thing with the God of the light is great and all, but it's because of the light that we see the pain we suffer. We see deformities.
Sure.
The light reveals the suffering. So the darkness helps us hide so we don't judge one another. So in my world, the polarity is based off whoever is giving is the most evil God, and the one that takes it away is the good God.
Yeah.
So like there's the God of storms, which is great because it allows the water to move. But there is also the God, I believe I have like a God that focuses exclusively on growth, and is that growing that causes things to hurt, the pain. So it is the ones that bring us the most that cause us to suffer, and they are the evil gods. And it's the gods who take away it in the end that are the good gods. But again, my deities don't believe in any concept of good or evil. They're like, I do what I do. I'm sorry that you suffer because of it, but I can't not be who I am.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a mortal thing that you create is good or evil. I mean, I'm a great Jedi by trade, right? I believe in both the light and the dark.
Yes.
But there's a lot of really strong arguments that the Jedi are actually bad, and the Sith are good.
I stand by that.
It's completely subjective.
There's a really good TV show, and I'd have to find out what it is. But it's there was like a murder, but it's from like the guy's perspective. And he looks like, from his perspective, he's all confident, and he looks at everything, and the woman is like always like seductive and like taking over him. And the other side, from the woman's perspective, she's all haggard, and he looks like he's a manipulator, right? So from both sides of the thing, it's a totally different perspective, and there's some line in the middle that is the actual truth.
I think Vantage Point?
Maybe. Well, no, there's a movie for Vantage Point, which was really good, but there's a TV show. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't matter. But the point is. I like that idea because it's all about balance, right? I mean, yes, sometimes people can get manipulated and tip the scale a little bit because they want more power or they're tired of balance or whatever. But it's a fun, real condition when you have mortals that are trying to put this label on something that is just
one of the things that I do that we haven't talked about yet, but is sort of off of that, is when I'm creating that perspective from mortal up. Usually I look at the dichotomy, and so you're green again. You have this sort of dichotomy between pleasure, pain, light, dark, nature, void, and you sort of map all those out, and this is how the mortals would view the gods, and you have to address that. I mean, every one of those has to be addressed.
You're good.
And I wanted to add to that slightly on what you're saying. It's great because I know there's an alignment chart that all D&D players know, chaotic to lawful, good to evil. But I'm a huge fan of the rose compass. I always have. But I use my rose compass as north to south is life versus death. East to west is love versus hate. Then you have the breaking points. You have salvation versus suffering. And then you end up having the light versus dark. They are opposing forces that help you direct yourself. But no direction is wrong. It's a matter of which way you're headed towards.
Sure.
So that's why the alignment is arbitrary in my world, only because we are ever evolving and ever changing, and our desires and purposes. Because, one of the biggest examples, and
it's always based on intent.
It is, because one example I've used, and I remember I did this in business school, we talked about slavery is bad, but it was legal. So at what point is something bad if someone's okay with it? But if we give them the choice and they choose slavery, is it still bad? If somebody chooses a certain lifestyle that doesn't hurt anyone else, but someone else is offended, at what point is it good versus bad?
Yeah. Right.
Depends on who you ask.
Right. Good life and good law are two different things.
Yeah.
And that's where my God see it that way.
Yeah. And a lot of players make mistakes when they lock themselves into an alignment. You might start off chaotic neutral, but you might evolve to evil. You might evolve to lawful. Something in that story will happen and you will change. because
The problem that I have with that is, again, it is somebody else's perspective of you. You should never view yourself as chaotic evil or evil at all. You're always going to be the hero of your own story.
Sure.
So you should always
Sure.
be the good guy.
Yeah.
Thegan is the good guy in my story.
I mean,
No, it makes
I
sense.
put real facts. Hemian's alignment is lawful good.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's
it's
not
always-
broken
you
a
should always
single
be
rule.
good.
He's not
Right.
doing anything wrong. He's following the rules. He's bringing back to life, but that's not against anything. He's just
Right.
He's allowed to play with dead people, and we all think it's weird, and that's
They
fine.
gave him the moral.
exactly. So people keep saying him as chaotic or evil, but it's like he's following the rules
Yeah.
and he's not hurting anyone.
Well, so going back to the question, I mean, when Ronan and I, when we started diving into my pantheon of Ukudor, which is becoming our pantheon, let's be real. So, because Ronan is becoming a writing partner for Ukudor, so we're going to start getting to some really juicy stuff together and fleshing things out. So originally, I left the structure just as Greek mythology, Zeus top, blah, 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 right? When you look at a lot of different pantheons, it's always male dominated. And one of the things I did want to change was the structure of that. So when we first started diving into the gods, we were like, okay, let's talk about these gods. I'm like, okay, do you have one main god? Or do you have multiple? I'm like, cool, I have three. Like they're brothers. I'm like, wait, they're all male. Like, let's make the younger one the sister. And who's the youngest one? It's Freyul. Okay, cool. So one god has the souls when they're alive. One god has the souls when they die. And the youngest sibling, the sister, who's Freyul, who is my Poseidon, essentially, is like, what about me? So she's like, all right, I got you. And then she wipes out the planet and takes all the souls. She goes, I guess they're all mine. So we have these different dynamics now within our gods. And instead of me having this whole slew of gods, we just have three. And then those three each created a partner. And then those three pairs had a child. And then all the other gods were just created for a war, essentially. So we took a completely different take on how the gods are into being. And we actually have a formula now, Hemian, don't listen, where you can create gods or dragons. I already told them how to create dragons. I made that mistake.
Demigods.
Demigods, dragons, and other things.
You'll see.
Yeah.
It's okay.
You don't know that yet. But so it's just kind of fun to play with that, right? Because like, why do what everyone else is doing? That's kind of boring. So you take it and you give it your own flair, and then it does something else.
But that was sort of back to what I was saying before, which is all we did was change the gender of one of them, and we were off running because it created dynamics that created all kinds
so
of
many
things.
things. Well, because when you do that now, it creates all these different dynamics, right? Even the fact that we decided that Okuma was kind of a chill guy, and his daughter Travanis is like, what the hell, Dad? So she's
Like
not going to
Hades-
go to her dad or her uncle because they're both dickheads. She's going to go to her aunt
Right.
to learn
Like
how to do all the
our
things,
Hades
yeah.
does not seek to overthrow our
No,
Zeus.
he is
he's totally cool with the underworld.
He's
And
like-
Oh, you
that-
mean how Hades is actually, by the way?
Yes,
Probably.
yeah,
Canonically speaking,
Yes.
Hades is like, oh yeah, I'm the cool stepdad. I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
going to
Yeah,
hell.
exactly.
That's what I do.
he loves it down there and he's cool. But
He's with
that
all the
then-
rockers. They're all just, doing coke and partying and like whatever.
I'm telling
It's-
you, he's like, no, we're cool here. I'm just keeping house cleaning what you need.
Yeah, exactly.
But
But
just do what you do.
But just that simple thing is taking Poseidon, who is predominantly male, which doesn't ever fucking make sense, because whenever you're at the sea, you always talk about her. Everyone always refers to the sea as in a feminine light, but why is the god of the sea always a male, right? We
That is
we
a
know the
weird
answer.
trait.
We know the answer to the question. I'm not going to ask the question, but it's just fun. Like he said, we just changed that one thing, and all of a sudden it just dominoed to all this amazing lore, and we're like, wow, like just being flexible enough, like, no, it has to be a man, like, no, it doesn't matter. And if it works in the alternate, like, why does Mother Earth have to? We know why Mother Earth has to be a woman, but in theory, you could play with the idea of maybe Mother Earth is masculine and maybe the Zeus is feminine, and like you view it from a different perspective, and you can go down. Yeah.
Because like in my world, the god of Earth is a dude, but he's a douche that no one likes because he's constantly throwing tantrums, which is why we have earthquakes, volcanoes. He's just throwing tantrums all the time. So the oldest sister is a woman who's like, calm down to stop the earth from shaking, and is the god of the sea to keep the plates in check. But then like the youngest sibling is non-binary because they're like, I am who I am. I don't conform to anything you believe. I am exactly who I am. That's why no one refers to them by him, her, even they. They only refer to them typically as their name, by look, and just calls it a day.
Yeah.
Because it's who they identify as. And when I did that, it changed the whole dichotomy, because I'm like, there's some macho men who are like, I am a cleric who worships this person, and some people got weird about it in the world lore, and I'm like, that dichotomy changes everything for a lot of people, and I think it's important to think of that.
My deities are non-binary, but they tend to be viewed as either more feminine or masculine, just because that's how most people
And I think in a 30,000-foot view,
work.
they would be. I think
Yeah,
a good god structure is going to be non-binary, non-gender, nothing.
Well, because
and
they
then they're
were
going to be prescribed something.
Yeah, because they were spawned by the Isle of Moddans, who are everything. They are every element, and they are non-binary, and they just sort of, sometimes the fire elemental will be a guy, sometimes they'll be a girl. It depends on when you meet them.
Yeah.
I literally have I roll a dice to see if they appear to you
RNG.
as anything or nothing.
I like that
right?
mechanic, and it kind of leads into Celtic Boar's question when they asked, do you ever put deities in humanoid avatars and give players boons or banes based off their interaction? And I like that. I like that you roll to see how that entity presents itself to the person, because, you know, Rex, maybe the traveler would appear in a male form, because maybe the traveler would know that Rex would take to that better, or maybe it would be a female form because Rex would take to it better, or maybe it would just be a form and Rex would take to that better. So like, it's kind of a fun mechanic to where the gods will manipulate themselves to fit what you will best listen to or not listen to, I guess.
And again, it can be as fantastical as you want. There are talking snakes, there are cows, there are burning bushes. I mean, you know what I mean? Like
snakes.
Well, okay, sorry, but you know what I mean. So it I agree. I think that is a good RP element to use at a table to whatever you think would be most advantageous for theatrics.
And that's how I feel about it. Like when my gods, when they do present themselves, they don't present themselves in his glory or her glory. They present themselves as the glory of Kaister. And whoever they are, that's their name. They present themselves in that glory that they choose. And a lot of times it's not even to appeal to, it's just, this is who I am. I am your God. If you worship me as I am. I'm not going to become a man because you're comfortable with it, or a woman because you're comfortable with it. I am who I am. And if you want me to accept you as my follower, accept me as your God. And all my gods are that way. They're all, because they are how I treat people. They're like, look, I live my life. I'm not here to serve you. You want to worship me? Fine. Sure. You want power? Cool. But I'm not going to change me to be for you.
The way I think about it for my gods is because they used to live on the planet, in physical form, and they all chose a form to live as and lived side by side, you know, mostly in temples, like tucked away in mountains and stuff. But you still lived side by side with mortals.
Like Rex.
Yeah, because Rex is immortal currently. You know, they live side by side with them, so they, you know, they may have taken a masculine form or have taken a feminine form, and so now that they've done that and they're no longer on the material plane because they have been banished by a certain someone who's still alive. That's it.
And it could be a situation too where the player, it's only like whatever vision they have is their specific interpretation. So you would ask the player, what do you think it looks like? Yeah. And then that is what appears to them.
I like that approach too, but at least for this
depending on how they
situations, because they were physical creatures at one point. Now whenever people see them, they tend to go to that form.
And I will say, because I also, a fun thing I do is my gods, they're anti-aesthetics, and I feel like that just makes my day every time. So a god of earth will maybe seem more airy and be less, you would expect all these earthen pieces of them or earthen features, but they're not. No. Like my god of death is he's pastel. That's how he loves pink. He loves flowers. He loves life. So people, whenever they encounter him, they're like, oh, who are you? And he's like, I'm Adamaeus, god of the death. And they're like, wait a minute, what? And he's petting like a bunny type thing. And that's who he is. And I love the anti-aesthetic, because just because you're the god of something doesn't mean that's your personality. Correct. It's just where your power is. Like, you don't have to match your power in aesthetic as well.
And speaking about your God and your personality and everything else, I want to talk about worshipers and all that. So we do have 30 minutes left. If you have any other questions, make sure to tag DM Chris Solo in the chat with question, and then whatever your question is, and I will tag that. Yes, bangs are too long. But thinking about worshipers, right? So I know there's a lot of worshipers of different deities and things and forgotten realms and everything else, and most of them are all relatively normal, excluding Vecna. Vecna is very specific, right?
Yeah.
But I want to hear about your gods that have unique worshiping tactics or things that might be different than the normal.
I can lead off.
Sure. Yeah.
And I talk about deities a lot in my world building because I feel like deities decide exactly where people go. But like, so a lot of my gods specifically, they don't care. And I think that's because I build my gods the idea that it's not their job to sit here at a phone waiting for their followers to call them and answer like, yeah, you're doing this prayer. Cool. I can give your crops this week. But there are a few gods who have enough ego where they won't listen to you unless you do specifically what they want. And there's also other gods who, no matter how much you pray, won't listen at all. And then people use moments of divine intervention. Like this God, I have gods that will never listen to a prayer. But because people kept praying and then luckily something good happened, they're like, the God listened. And that is a literal canon in my world where the gods just live their lives as they are. And when I build my worshipers, it's depending, and every god has like maybe they're specific, but most of the time people worship differently. Just like actual religions like Christianity, a lot of people worship differently. Some say go to church this often, some pray this way, some say as long as you do it with the book. Some people say that the book is allegorical, some say literal. And I treat my gods the same way, that if you go across the city, those people may worship the same God in a completely different way. Some may go to church 3 days a week, pray 7 days, do 6 hours of this, while the other ones are like, no, as long as we're not douches, our God loves us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in my world, mine is more, at least when it comes to fulfilling of prayer and that sort of thing, mine are more in line with, I guess, real world, in that it's never going to be overtly like, oh, here I am the God of nature, here, let me take care of your problem. It's going to be, we prayed, something extraordinary happened, it must have been the God. So it's never going to be this. Did he just leave for everybody else?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, cool.
Oh, okay.
But it didn't. It's never this just blatantly obvious thing, unless it needs to be for story reasons.
Yes.
Which there will be, and I think that makes it more impactful too when it does happen. But that's how I do it. And then also, I think that you can, like, one of the things that I don't like about tropes is like Vecna, for instance. You're only ever going to have bad people worshiping Vecna for bad things. You can have a group of people obsess about a really good god and still do evil things in the name of that good god. So,
what makes you think that only bad people are going to worship Vecna?
Well, I'm saying typically.
That's the trope.
In a typical trope, you're going to have bad people worshiping Vecna, good people worshiping the good god, and that's it. But you can have a group of cultists worshiping a good god and doing evil things in their name. And vice versa, I guess. You could have bad or good people worshiping Vecna for X reason.
Using Vecna, since we're talking about him, and he happens to be a thing right now in Shogall. You guys, the legends, let's just call them by their name. The legends went through that super creepy town with the super creepy people. But besides them being creepy,
they didn't do anything bad.
They were not bad. They never once tried to attack.
Not once.
She only tried to peer into Rex's mind once, and that's it.
And we did a deal. We went to their shop. We did some trading.
They are not bad people. Meta, they weren't sacrificing children. They just didn't have any.
Yeah, no, they were just extremely creepy and therefore needed to die because we were uncomfortable. Right? Isn't that how life works? Perspective. Whoever has the biggest sword that tells you how history works.
That's right.
Sorry, I realized I was muted. Yeah. So, I mean, without going too deep into religion, because it's just one of those things you don't want to touch. But, I brought up the Crusades for a reason. Like, there are certain gods that the majority of people are pleasant people. But there's a lot of assholes that believe in Jesus Christ. So there's just... so many people have died in the name of God. It makes me sick. And I've gotten in arguments with people because more people have died in the name of God than they have in all the world wars put together. So like you want to put that into perspective. So you can take a worship and you can go to an obsession. So it doesn't matter if your entity is evil inherently or not evil inherently. You could worship the goddess of peace and like take that to the extreme.
If no one's living, there's no more war, and therefore peace is achieved.
Right. I mean, the good thing and bad thing is a crutch, but it's also a justification.
Yes.
I will say, to make sure we don't go too far into that taboo territory of the discussion.
Yes.
I think anything in zealousy can be taken bad, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Like zealousy almost always leads to overextending or overanalyzing anything you're given and taking it literally one step too
it's
far.
about abusing that power though, and that's what I believe the Crusades were actually about, was about abusing power and taking over land, not the religion. And that was the only reason
that's what I mean when
bringing that up.
justification, like you need a reason to do the bad thing you want to do. Okay, well, we'll just do it in the name of God.
However, I will say it's a matter of perspective, because during the Crusades itself, like as an example, the Crusades were not bad. It's the certain approaches that was taken during the Crusades that made it bad. Just like one thing that I've always told people, like Hitler is a great example of this concept. Hitler was not a bad leader. Just what he did was bad at a point, but he helped improve Germany during the time. We highlight the fact of everything he did wrong, but it's the zealousy that went too far.
Yeah, there's arguments that saying that Hitler wasn't even the problem. And
yes,
I'm not
there's
going
also
down this
that.
route, but that Hitler isn't the one that said, "Hey, go kill all these people." But the people who believed in Hitler, talking about the supreme race, took it there, and he didn't stop them.
And bring that to the gods can be the same way. Like there could be a god who's literally like, look, spread peace, and people are like, will do, kill everyone so they won't fight war. It's like, no, that's not what I meant at all, but you're praying and how you want to do it. And other times are like, there could be gods who say, we must no longer have any violence, no one should be allowed to be suffered. They're like, cool, well, like bet ball, I guess, and I'll feed the hungry. It's like, that's not what I meant. I meant like kill them. And they're like, no, you want us to stop suffering. Well, they're homeless. Let's give them a house. And that's what I mean. Like it's the zealousy and abuse of power can make even the greatest mission turn toxic.
Well, and it kind of leads into what Ferrix was asking. And Ferrix has asked, do your gods need to be the most powerful beings in your world? And then he said, I know that Solo has Vulrock, and I'm going to tell you about Vulrock here in a second. But it's interesting because you don't have to be powerful, right? There are people who may be worshipped as gods, like what's his nuts from the Persian Empire?
Xerxes?
Yes, wasn't a god. Normal dude. Viewed as a god, did terrible things, right? He wasn't powerful, but everyone thought he was powerful. So just that power of persuasion and the power of thought. But going back to Vulrock, because it's some fun piece of lore that Ronan and I came up with, and it's terrible. But the creature and the entity that put Travanis in her cage and brought that cage to the Venrium College for the wizards to protect was Vulrock. Aesir created Vulrock to stop Travanis, who we all know then Vulrock went, found corruption magic, corrupted stuff, killed Aesir's daughter. That's irony for you. So Vulrock is not the most powerful god. He is one of them, technically. There are 3 prime gods that are more powerful than him, and 2 major gods that are equally as powerful as he is. But technically, he's dead.
Question mark, quotation, yeah.
But I want to hear what everyone else has to say. Like, Dianne, like, do your gods have to be really powerful in your world to get their point across?
No, you just have to be persuasive.
I was literally going to say the same thing. Honestly, you can have like some dude who has no power at all, can literally con their way into deification, con their way into making people believe it. Like amount of movies that do this great statue of a god, they're like blessing him, and it's just some dude in the back of the cave with a horn that's getting all the sacrifices and the food saying, yes, give me food and you'll have a great winter or something. And then people are like, oh, here's food. And it's just some gremlin who's just using a megaphone type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that god. I want a gremlin god.
A gremlin god? I'm telling you, one of my favorite, I've read a story, I forgot what the story was, but it was a story of a god. It was a great god, but they had no actual power. And it was worshipped by one dude. but he kept being worshipped by the one dude. And as gods came and rise, this one god was the only one who had one follower the whole time. And because of that, it was the only god that lasted after the entire empire fell.
Yeah.
Because he had at least one follower throughout the wars, because no one bothered that god because he was irrelevant. So he became the supreme god with no power.
Yeah, and I do think there needs to be some sort of perceived notion of power, though, because that's the basis of faith and worship, that there is an almighty or a being beyond their mortal life. So whether that be through persuasion or what, it doesn't really matter the conduit they use, but there has to be at least this perceived notion of greater than I.
Yeah.
Therefore I worship.
I mean, as during the Dark Week, one of the players, I'm looking at you, Varix, killed one of the gods at the end of the session, went through as the god was like, kind of like, did all this to do whatever, tried to leave, and Varix's character was like, nope, gotta kill you, and just hit him with a hammer and killed him. And everybody's like, wait a minute, what? The god's dead? I'm like, yeah, no, the god is just a person at the end of the day with power, sure, but if you catch them off guard, they're a person at the end of the day. And a solid, a high, 19 on the die against a DC of 15 is going to hit.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because like players killing gods is a very interesting mechanic, which usually doesn't happen to your higher level, 17, 18, whatever. But technically, by the book, when you hit level 20, you are a god. Technically. How do you all handle that in your games, in your worlds? I know, Ronin, you don't DM because you don't DM.
I got too big an ego.
Not really.
I will say, Dan, take it.
I have a hard time thinking of like just level 20 being gods. My gods are more powerful than a level 20. Sorry.
So for me, level 20 means I don't believe that level 20 makes you a god. I believe level 20 makes you a legend. Alexander the Great, Alexander the Great, person of the Macedon Empire, Guan Yu, Chinese Empire, Nobunaga Oda, all three people in history who were so great in their time, they were considered gods in their own right.
Sure.
If you're level 20, you are equivocally that, meaning you can face a god. One-on-one, probably not. But there's a chance you could probably still take the god and maybe win, because I believe by level 20, you have enough power to be smart. If you're smart about it, sure.
I mean,
my gods aren't like wipers where they can Thanos snap you.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I'm not saying like that my like gods are like way more powerful than level 20, but like Vecna is not a god in my world.
Not yet.
Did you just tell me? Did you just say Vecna's level 20? Is that what I just heard?
Well,
you're only.
It's a CR. He's a CR rating.
A CR rating.
Level. He's on a level because he's not.
But this also goes back to how you decide to structure your gods, right? So I don't foresee. I don't know. Sola may view it differently, but like Akuma, like the big three, I don't even see a group of level 20 characters. Like they're the prime gods. Like they are who they are for a reason, and they are almighty. So but everything else may be fair game. Yeah. So everything else may be fair game in the right circumstances and the right conditions, whatever. But that's going to be how you've developed your gods. Maybe you have an almighty.
We can use that as an example, because Volrock, technically by our standards, when we created him, is a major god, right? So it's the highest tier before Prime, and it took 6 of them twice to try to kill him, right? So they didn't kill him the first time; they tried to kill him the second time. They killed him, but 5 of the 6 players were dead, not unconscious, but dead. GW was the only one barely alive, and they killed him, finally, after like a 2-day fight, right? So like that, it's possible, and they were like 19, I think, was when they fought him. So like, I mean, I get it, but like, I also don't agree that they should just automatically be gods, and I like that Jordan brought up Alexander the Great, because he was a shitty fighter. He wasn't anything special. He just said, let's go do this. And he was like the influencer, right? He's the commander. He's the general. But he sucks. Like you get him alone, you're gonna kick his ass. But
Yeah, 1v1, he wouldn't beat most people.
but he inspired and he influenced and whatever, and that's what gods do, right? They inspire you. They don't have to do it, right? No, you do it. You do this for me.
I mean, I think the best way to define a god in most worlds like these are, a god is not great. The god is perceived as great and therefore becomes great.
Yeah.
I think therefore I am is how I think it is, where if enough people believe it, it manifests. And if enough people don't believe it, then maybe it's not.
I mean,
it won't be as true.
Heath Ledger's Joker is a perfect example. Snaps a thing, we have tryouts, but only one spot open, and throws a stick in the room and walks out of the room. That's a demonstration of power, right?
A massive one.
He could have took them both, but he doesn't want both. He wants someone who's going to fight for it, right? So he throws a stick in the thing, and two friends have to kill each other, right? So like that demonstration is like worship worthy, right?
I mean, that's why you also get people who are considered saints in some like faiths are seen almost as godly because what they do is equivocally that great. You have a lot of people who are like, that's why clerics are so unique, because they worship a god to a point that they get the blessings from the god. But if they no longer listen to the god, well, then they lose their power. But then you can get like a sorcerer who can get enough power, a wizard who's like, well, I'm pretty much close to a god. And if they do nothing with it, then they're nothing to anyone. But if they choose to take over a kingdom and then bring that kingdom to prosperity, people are like, oh, that was a god because of what they accomplished afterwards.
Great.
That's kind of how I feel about it.
So we have about 15 minutes left. Are there any questions that any of you have for either one of you? Do you have questions about a certain person's world or what they did with a god or anything like that?
You know what, while we're here, so Dianne, when Casual came to you with the character Rex and mentioned his goal of, deification, like obviously, I don't know if you've dealt with a character with that kind of god complex. What was like your initial reaction and like, I don't know, what were the thoughts going through when you received this request or this ambition of a character?
First thing I thought of was, okay, this is cool.
All right.
Literally the first thing I thought of. And then, of course, I went into logistics. Like, okay, so how do I do this? Like, but I really think it's going to work out based on, like, Lindsay's character's desires. And now we have, like, Jinx and her feelings on deities. And Frizz is kind of, I don't know, like he's not really taken a hard stance on deities, but
I'm pretty sure he's not going to like Vecna.
Yeah, there's pretty much a hard line drawn there now.
Probably not, but he wants, obviously we know from the secret conversation that he wants to help liberate the gnomes and the dwarves from the oppression of the kingdom, which I think is going to directly help facilitate Rex and his desires.
Beautiful. I do have another question. This one is kind of mainly for Dianne and Solo, but obviously Ronin, you can chime in on the general concept of it. When you're designing a god, obviously there's the fact that gods may or may not have walked the earth. What point do you decide, okay, the gods walk the earth, or the gods have their own domain outside of the mortal realm? Like how you have the Feywild and you have the what is it? I can't remember all the realms in like they do in, but like you have multiple
Feywild, Shadowfell. Those are
Shadowlands
mirroring.
as well.
Those are mirroring the material plane, but they're.
Yeah,
but
and then
the
like you have
gods
those,
don't live there. They live on like.
And then you have the divine. Yeah, and then you have Elysium and all that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
at what point do you decide, okay, my gods are from this other divine realm in here, or were they part of space, or do you actually create divine realms for your gods that they either created, live in? Like, how do you handle the concept of beyond the mortal realm when it comes to deities?
For me, because my whole world was created by the Ilamadans, which are elemental beings. So, like, if you look at the cosmic map in the I don't know if it's the player's handbook or
It's in the player's handbook,
DM's
yeah.
guide, but the cosmic map, like they have alignment zones. So like, you know, the good, evil, like neutral, whatever.
Yeah, based on the 9 alignments
awful.
they have.
Yeah, so they have those zones. Well, I've taken those zones and put it in elements. So
there's like elemental realms
right.
that then created.
And the other realms are like next to those elemental realms and are kind of just like still overseen by that element, but not like a
They're, like,
fiery
less-
pit.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
like not, but so my deities walked the material plane first, and then the War of the Ancients, they were banished, and they have since scattered to whichever realm that they chose.
So they didn't get to create. They fell in. They were sent to maybe.
They were
their...
sent.
Beautiful.
Yes.
So only like a few minutes solo.
Yeah, I mean, and Ronin can chime in on this too, because we were actually talking.
Yeah, that's why I was like, it would connect.
Yeah, we were talking about some of the things. So originally, the gods roamed around, and then they meddled too much, so Azir kicked them out. That was the really, really surface level generic stuff. Since the surge and the dawn of mortals, I think is what the age of mortals is what we call it.
Age of Mortals, yeah.
Gods are technically forbidden to walk around the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, no one.
We have not fully established the location of them currently, though.
Correct.
Like a
but we
physical
did talk
location.
about an Elysium, an Olympus sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think it would be another plane. It would be another pocket dimension of some sort. But we have talked about that, but we haven't nailed it down yet.
Yep. And I have a similar structure in my novel, which is, I mean, the idea of the gods in my book are a little more abstract in that, like, there is a culture that believed that the moon is the god. So that, there, and the sun is the other god, not just representations, but like physical representations. So they don't actually have a physical location where they are. They're just worshipped as that object. So they are a part of the world. But you can go about it any way you want. Again, whatever you want. Just throw them in there. Throw them out there. Who cares?
And the only reason, and I like that, because the only reason I wanted to bring that up is because you get a lot of so Norse mythology has Yggdrasil, where the great tree connects to the 9 realms. You have Greek mythology, which has Mount Olympus, and then the underworld, but then the underworld has multiple layers to it. And then you have a lot of different versions where it's like, hey, we have our realm, and then we have the gods' realm, and then there's the gods' realm where they live, or the gods' realm where they made it. And there's just so much that intertwines. So it's, I don't know, it's good to know whether or not your gods are so strong where they made more realms outside of the mortal realm, or
and
material realm,
we made
or are they
it to
just
where,
part of the material realm?
Didn't we finalize that the gods basically saw the planet as a source of
Yes, So
Zarian, right? So they're not from there.
No, they're not
originally.
from here. So the 3 prime gods, Aesir, my Zeus, Okuma, my Hades, and Freul, my Poseidon, those 3 gods were sent here from mom and dad, probably. And they saw that this planet was full of Rosari crystals, which is our magic essence. And the planet was full of titans that were eating these. Just eating them. Don't care about it. And they're like, yeah, we can't have this. So they created all the gods, like an army of gods, which there's only 23 left. But there was way more than that took over and killed all these titans to take over the planet and then created it what it was.
I know we only have a few more minutes left, right?
Yeah.
So I do have one last question if there's no one for chat. So out of all the deities you've ever created in all your world building of any kind, you don't even know what I was going to ask. I was going to ask which one's
Who's the worst?
Still Travanus.
So it's a 2-part, one, which one is your favorite that you were making? And then also, if you were a member of your own world of that, which deity would you honestly feel like you would be a worshiper of, if at all?
Favorite
Same
deity
answer.
I am making. Can I
Rex?
say Anna?
Does Anna go through deification or just becomes a
I don't
very
know that
powerful
yet.
person? Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, I have hints.
So no, that does count. You built a character to become like a god. Is there
Vegan wants to be a god, but really it's Anna.
That's wild.
Sorry.
And is there
Sorry.
Together.
Would you also say you would worship
Together?
We
Anna then?
ascend together.
Maybe.
I don't know about together.
We'll
There's
see.
too much ego
We'll see.
between Vegan and Anna. One of you got to be the boss, and I don't think either.
And
is okay
Anna's
with
the
it.
boss. Vegan can be a demigod. too honest.
Ronan's like,
talk.
oh,
We'll talk
we
about
gonna
We'll
talk
talk
about
about
this.
I'm so ready for the finale, guys. You've
We're gonna table that.
Like, that's my favorite moment right now. We're digging in and are like, so which one is gonna rule? And I was like, me obviously thinking like, we gonna have to talk.
I don't know what gave you that impression, but
Ooh. I just wanted to drop that relationship bomb in there.
Just
I pulled a solo
based
through a
on
grenade and walked
things
away.
You said.
I had so
Vegan.
real quick. I'm gonna change the subject because I went off of this one. So my dwarves believe in a trinity of time, chaos, and harmony. And as time progresses, everything slides on a scale from chaos to harmony. Different things affect it, whatever. And I wrote it and I was like, man, I want to, this is the religion I want, because basically they don't believe in afterlife or reincarnation or anything. They believe in immortality through recognition. So, time is the ultimate decider, and the longer they can be more renowned, the longer than they are whatever. So that's they strive to create great inventions or discover great things or whatever, so that the time aspect of it carries on forever. So but that was one I wrote for the door. So that's the one I would like to worship, although it's not a person or a deity at all.
That's great. Yeah. I do want to say, with whatever time we have left, advice to everyone when you're making your deities. One thing that I know I've had people talk to me about when they make them: don't be afraid to go crazy with your gods. There's no wrong way to do it. I've had people tell me they're scared to make a god too evil because they're like, I don't feel like my players would be okay. And I'm like, if you have a god that literally wants people to be sacrificed Blood Eagle style, then honestly, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's the culture. Yeah. Like, if you find out that a culture eats worms and you don't like that, you wouldn't say, well, they shouldn't exist. You just be like, that's not for me. Don't be afraid to make gods like that. And also don't be afraid to go to reach into other cultures, to like look up honest cultures, see what they worship, and kind of pull from that. I know people have told me they're scared to like do Native American cultures. They want to do it wrong. But if you use it as an influence, there's nothing wrong with that. Right. You know, pay the respect to it. Like, if you name one of your gods after one of them, just be a little more accurate with it. Do the research, but have fun with it. Like, don't have that fear of, oh, they may not be okay with the type of gods I make. It's a world. Yeah. There are things that we won't be okay with, but that's part of the world.
And to add to that, even if you're streaming, like, you can always change it. You can always modify it slightly. You can change it. You can amend a rule. You can modify things. If you don't like that's the thing, or none of your players like it, but it's a big part of your story, then change it.
I would say the first thing I would do, if you just want to dabble into the aspect of it, is just start with a name change. Like, that way when somebody comes out and is like, oh, that's Hades, be like, no, it's not. It's Bob. Bob the God.
That is very good.
Bob the God.
Because Hades has gone through 4 different name chains in Greek and Roman mythology all
so
together.
Just change it, and it's yours. Automatically it's yours. Yep. And then you can tweak it and change it however you want.
I mean, that's what I did with mine, yeah.
I mean, that's what the Roman Empire did entirely to the Greek mythology. So, I mean,
fair.
Let's
just
say,
real world approach.
They were literally like, oh, god of wealth and underworld, Pluto.
Because different languages have different names.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. So, in the final moments, Ronin, where can people find you?
At Ronin Fawks on Instagram, FAWKS, and on our Discord. Oh, and every Friday at 4 p.m. for Fox Talks.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan.
Jordan Campbell. Find me as casual_Campbell on all social media, and on half of the shows on the network, and always in Discord.
Thank you. Ms. Dianne.
You can find me at the Pretty DM on Instagram, sometimes Twitter, and here in about 30 minutes for Legends of Shoggoth.
Amazing.
And every other day.
Well, that is today.
That is today.
That is right now.
I am Chris Solo. You can find me at DM Chris Solo in all social medias, or Fable42. They're both my brain. But this... I had a whole train of thought that just went right out the door. Go ahead. See, I did it, and I said it, and then it died, and then we buried it, and then I remembered... And then we dug it up, and then it's alive. So go ahead and enter raffle to enter the Between Show giveaway that I totally had ready. And we will Dianne will call the winner during her announcements. During yeah, we haven't done it in a month.
That's my job now.
Yeah. So go ahead and enter raffle for video game in the chat. Don't forget to catch the three of us and Utame and Eddie on Discount Bard's channel tomorrow at 6. We're
Come
gonna
watch me scream.
Dead by Daylight. It's going to be awesome. And as always, this is Quests and Answers, where we go on a quest to find those answers. We'll see you guys next week.